Yo, what's up guys? This is Topics, and I have an interesting video I wanted to do today. I want to compare Dwarf versus Night Elf racials usage in the War Within Season 2. So, I play Protection Warrior, and many Protection Warriors are Dwarfs, but we also have the option to go Night Elf, as you know, most class spec combos in World of Warcraft now are possible. However, you guys know that the meta tank right now, VDH, is either Night Elf or Blood Elf. So they are basically just permanently playing with Shadowmeld, which is the Night Elf racial. The Dwarf racial is Stoneform, that removes basically any debuff. Poison, Curse, Magic, Bleed, and Disease. So, I just wanted to do this cool video and take a look at... Let me get this off the screen. And I wanted to take a look at the different usages this season and kind of the pros and cons, because I've been heavily thinking about going Night Elf to do some skips, but I'm just not sure if it's worth it. So we are going to take a look using... I think I should make this bigger for the sake of this video. Let's take a look at all the usages. So we're going to start with Priory, and I'm just going to click New Route, just so that we have a blank slate here to work with. So, Priory, Night Elf meld usages. I personally don't think there is any in this dungeon. You know, you do this first pull here, maybe a second pull, you go left, pull some of this stuff, come pull some of this, do the boss, and then you basically just clear the entire rest of the dungeon. There's not really any skips. I mean, I guess potentially you could do like a skip in this last room. Like maybe you could pull this stuff into the hall, meld, and go past, but you would just have to pull more outside, which they're basically the same. There's just all these caster mobs, so I don't really think there's any need to meld skip in here. However, there is a good Stoneform usage on Darkflame with Pierce Armor, which is a bleed. So you probably can get 2 usages, maybe 3 on high keys if the fight lasts 4 minutes. You can just dwarf this off, this bleed, which really does hurt a lot. You know, you're using a defensive on this bleed as a tank, and so to be able to Stoneform it off can help you save a defensive, because you end up running out of defensives, you know, during the second half or maybe the last quarter of the fight. That's the scariest part, when you're starting to get dry and you're maybe starting to fall behind, or your healer's having a hard time. So in Priory, we'll note this down here. We'll put Captain Darkflame bleed. So there's a use, and we'll go through this after and figure out like how mandatory some of this stuff is, and then we'll help try and make a decision, because this I actually am going to make a decision probably based off this list, because I've been really thinking about switching. So you guys are kind of experiencing my decision making live right now. So all right, Cinderbrew Meadery. Again, I'll just put a new test route in here, just so that we don't have to stare at all these polls. So you cleared the whole first room, but these patrons, they do a mean mug, so you know, smashes the mug over the target's head, inflicting damage and causing the target to bleed. So this stacks up quite heavily on the first pull, and if you do a big pull on this side after as well, you can end up with multiple of these patrons in the pull, and this can stack up. It is 10 seconds, which means if you have to kite, you have to kite for 10 seconds, which is a long time. As Protection Warrior, your mitigation's probably going to drop if you're kiting for 10 seconds, which is even scarier. So there's that use of it. And then obviously you have the B-lits that do the B-Venom magic stack. This I'm not really going to count, because your healer can just dispel this, and you're never really pulling enough of these to put your healer in a position where they can't dispel you fast enough. So that doesn't really count to me. The only way I would count that is if you're gaining stacks so fast your healer can't keep up with the dispel. But obviously the most famous one is the meld skip over here, where you clear this entire hall like this, and then you would pull this pack over to this corner, and your team would run by, and then you'd meld skip it. However, there is a different way of doing this. Instead of skipping this pack and doing this pack, you can actually just do this pack, and then you can shroud or invispot this pack, and then you end up like playing a pull like this after or something like that. And I've actually done this on a 14. It worked really well. It's not something people are super used to, but you can kind of do this instead of melding this skip. So with all those things considered, let me write that down. So the dwarfs are the let me put Cinderbrew Mean Mug Bleed for patrons. And then we have, I can't spell. And then we have the double, oh, I gotta put brew again. Brew, double hobgoblin, skip. Okay, let's move on. Next one, Darkflame Cleft. So, let's see. You know what? Maybe I won't clear the routes. There's probably, let me delete this. Sorry, I'm OCD. I gotta clean up my MDT. Maybe let's not clear the routes. It might actually help us visualize this more. So, first pull for Stoneform, there actually is something again, because these menial laborers do crude weapons, and it's funny because, oh, it looks like MDT actually needs to be updated. Yeah, because unless there was nerfs that I don't know about, or maybe they're saying that this is not dispellable anymore. Anyways, this crude weapons, as far as I know, is a bleed that you can dwarf off, and this stacks very fast first pull. Like, your healer can't do anything about it. So if you're pulling a lot of these laborers in first pull, which, you know, I'm doing everything except this one pack, you're going to get a lot of these stacks, and it's going to really hurt. So I usually gather everything up, go to this next hallway, and then by the time I get here, I have to dwarf off the bleed. Otherwise, I'm usually close to dying as a protection warrior as I'm gathering. So I'm actually curious right now if they made that, like, not dispellable. I'm going to look. Let me open up Wowhead, because we're going to take a look at this, because I'm super curious now if there was news that I missed that's causing that to not be dispellable, or not dispellable, but dwarfable anymore, because there should be a little bleed icon there. Alright, this news is loading. My computer is slow as heck, or maybe it's Wowhead. Okay, nothing there. Nothing there. Okay. I don't see anything. Yeah, I don't see anything, and I would have seen, you know, some content creators do news about this. So I don't think that's a thing. I think that MDT just doesn't show that you can dwarf this off. So I'm still going to count that. And then obviously we have the creepers at the end that do the creeping shadow magic debuff, but this is dispellable now. And yeah, I just noticed that MDT's not showing that either. I don't know why. But anyways, this is a magic debuff that's dispellable, and so I'm not really worried about that. Your healer can just remove that off you. So there's only really that one Stoneform use in here, but I don't really think there's any melds. I'm not aware of any popular melds in this dungeon. It's basically just a W key. So that being said, let's mark that down. The dwarf will do Darkflame Cleft, first pull, bleeds. Okay. Moving on. Let's do Rookery. So float skip. Let me go to my skips route. So do this first pull, clear first room, pretty standard. Come down here, do this giant pull this, and then there's this skip. So you can shroud or You can shroud with rogue. If you're a druid, you can go stealth. If you're, a priest or mage, you can fade or invis. But if you don't have any of those things, you're gonna have to invis pot this if you don't have a rogue. However, if you have a class with meld, or a tank with meld, like VDH, you can just pull them into this corner over here and wait till your team passes down the stairs, and then you can meld, and that allows you to skip. And then there's not any other important dwarfs in this dungeon, so this dungeon basically only has a meld skip. So let me add that in here. We'll do Rookery, meld skip, corner by stairs. Floodgate. So let's think about dwarfs. I can't think of any off the top of my head. Let's see. Contract. You know what? The only thing, if you're gonna pull these blood warpers, they do put a warp blood. Or is it the contort blood? No, it's the warp blood. So this actually does go on as a debuff, and you can actually dwarf this off to make you take less. One of these is a debuff, and this is the debuff, the warp blood debuff, and then this one's the cast. As you can see, this one is a cast timer, this one doesn't. You'll have this debuff, and then when it does the warp blood cast or channel, it'll do more damage to you if you have this debuff. So you can actually dwarf this off to make you take less damage. However, it's not really, there's no really problem surviving this as a tank. A priest can like MD the whole group and make them take less damage. But this isn't, I'm probably not going to count this because I've never once felt even remotely in danger at all from this. Oops. So I don't really think there's really any important dwarfs in here. However, skips. There's actually a weird skip you can do jumping up to a scaffold here, but which some teams do, but I really think it's nowhere close to mandatory for this dungeon, or I wouldn't even say it's that valuable. It's just an alternate route you can do. However, skipping bubbles on like anything higher than a 15 is pretty mandatory. You can see I've already adjusted my routes. Like what I want to start doing is getting Path of Frost, Water Walking, a Levitate, and then Shrouding to skip bubbles over here. But if you have a tank with Meld or DH, you can just pull bubbles back here, wait till your team skips till the end of the bridge, and then your priest kind of mind soothes this so it doesn't pull, and then your tank leaps forward and melds. So this is a very valuable skip to be able to do in Floodgate, and for that reason, I think I'm probably going to put that on here. So we'll go Floodgate, bubbles, skip. Next, let's look at Motherlode. So Motherlode. There's two bleeds I can think of right now. There is, before the second boss, we have Taskmaster Ascari, which does heavy slash, cause the target to bleed, physical damage every 2 seconds for 8 seconds. Now, I will say, this is probably one of the heaviest hitting bleeds this season, but you can kite this lieutenant pretty easily because he stops. He'll stop and do like an explosion, and it gives you time to kite, and he's really not that fast. So this is easy to kite. However, it is one of the hardest hitting bleeds. And then on Azarok, where's the ability? I think it might be on one of the ads. Yeah, this ad will fixate someone and do like a jagged cut, which is why you have to kite this ad, especially as a DPS. But this ad can actually fixate a tank, if you taunt it or if it decides to fixate you, and it'll do this bleed. But this is easily kiteable, so I'm probably not going to count that. And you shouldn't really be face tanking this ad anyway, regardless, if you're a DPS or tank. So that's not really as concerning. So I'll probably just put the lieutenant bleed. However, there are some really cool skips you can do with Meld in here. So you see this this Peacemaker has stealth detect, and people hate pulling Peacemakers. So you can skip the first Peacemaker here by jumping over the wall. You can skip this next Peacemaker if you wanted to. your priest would soothe these 2 packs to left and right. Your team would run through the center, and like you can pull the Peacemaker over here as a tank with meld, and then meld it, and your team can run through, and then you don't have to pull it. That's optional, depending on routing, but Peacemakers do suck. Another thing you can do is this 4-pack over here. You can do the same thing. You can aggro it as a tank. You can kind of pull it over the side of the boss arena. Your team can run into this side, and then you can meld, and it avoids the double mastermind, which these masterminds hurt very much on high keys. You never want to pull 2 together if you can avoid it. And then the last meld I can think about is the double War Machine, which when the War Machine does like the charge shot channel, that really, really hurts on high keys. I've been seeing teams skip this on like 17s and higher. Your tank will just pull it to the side here by the hill, and your team will kind of run up to the final platform of the boss, and then your tank will leap and meld. So there's 3 optional melds. Well, let's think of this for a second. I do really, really think that the double Mastermind meld and the double War Machine meld are probably going to be mandatory on high keys, because it's just going to be too much damage for your group to survive. The Peacemaker is probably optional. As a Prot Warrior, you can spell reflect the charge shield cast, which then, you know, it saves you and your team. So there's a lot to put here. Let me get this down here. So I'm gonna put Motherlode, Ascari bleed, and then Motherlode. There's gonna be like 3. It's gonna be Peacemaker, Motherlode, double Mastermind, and then there's Motherlode, double War Machine. Let's keep going. And hey, if you're still watching the video, thanks for sticking with me. I was thinking this might be a fun one if you're also playing Prot War. I don't know how fun this video would be to watch if you're not. But yeah, this is kind of how I'm reasoning things out. So Theater of Pain. Nothing really at the beginning here. There is, I think it's Decaying Breath knocks. Where's the poison dot here? Yeah, this Withering Touch. I'm not actually sure which one it is. I think there is some type of disease or poison that can be dispelled here, but it doesn't really hurt the tank, so I'm going to ignore it. Let me see. Is there anything else in this dungeon that Dwarf is going to save you or kind of be mandatory for? I can't really think of anything. Let's see. Alright, is there any melds in here? I don't really think there's any melds. This dungeon is very much W key, and just, you know, the places you save time is pulling 9 and 8 together and just assigning kicks, pulling 11 and 10 together, assigning kicks, making sure that you're lusting at the proper times, and your DPS need good damage because there's a tight check in here. So yeah, Theater Pain actually does not have anything that I can think of. Priory, Brew, Darkflame Cleft, Motherlode, Rookery, Floodgate. So this is the first dungeon so far that actually has neither a dwarf or meld use, which is crazy. It just shows how W key it is. Let's look at Workshop. So the first bleed I can think of is after you kill the first boss and you go down into the tunnel, and you have these processing units that do puncture. This is a bleed on the tank, and this actually hurts quite a bit. I would say this is the 3rd nastiest bleed after the Captain Dalecry bleed, first boss in Priory, and the Lieutenant bleed on Ascari and Motherlode. This is probably the 3rd nastiest. I don't think there's been any times where Dwarf has felt like it saved my life on this, though. I think as long as you have wall for every one of these, you're fine. So this is probably optional. And then you also get a magic dot on the Cujo boss, but that's a healer job to dispel, and you want the healer to dispel that because the healer needs to make sure that they have CDs and that the whole group is topped before they dispel you, because it does an AoE blast. So you don't want to be dispelling that yourself because you want to let the healer kind of control that. But there is a good meld skip, and it's at the end here. So what teams have been doing is some teams pull this 5-pack and assign kicks. There's like 4 casters in here. So coordinated teams have been killing this pack, and the DH will grab this 3-pack, pull it into the boss room, and the other team comes in and goes to this side, and then the tank melds. So it allows you to skip this 3-pack. However, you can do what I'm doing here, and you can just actually skip this pack with Mind Soothe or Shroud, and then just play the 3-pack, and it allows you to pull less dogs. So I would say that this one is probably optional as well, in terms of a meld skip. But I also have seen teams pull all of this to the corner over here. The team runs past and then they meld, but that's a little bit more risky, because if these defense bots start channeling their AoE and someone gets hit and panics and presses a button, they might aggro. If the team doesn't go fast enough, some squirrels can start getting sent out from the Tinkerer here. So usually I see teams play one of these 2 packs. But with that being said, let's mark that down because that's the last one. So I'll put workshop. I'll just put processing unit, puncture, bleed. So as you can see, it's basically all bleeds that we need dwarf for. There's not really any crazy diseases, poisons, or curses. And the magic dots the healer can just handle. Okay, let's put workshop. Meld one of the last 2 packs. Okay, so we're at the point now in the video. Thanks for still watching if you stuck with us. We're at the point now where we got to go through this and figure out what's mandatory, what's not. Is there any way around these things? So I'm going to organize these dwarfs in terms of severity. I would say the Captain Dalecry. Well, hold on a second here. You know what? We got to think about this from a Prot warrior perspective. I've done 15s pretty much on all these keys. I would actually say the one that feels the most dangerous for me, thinking about not having a dwarf for it, if you believe this, is probably actually going to be this one. And I'll explain to you why. I'm just going to put this as the worst. Darkflame Cleft first pull bleeds. The reason why it's so bad is because you need to do this first pull together. If you split this, you're just going to have terrible times in this dungeon. You're probably not going to time high keys. You need to do this first pull together. Because of that, you're going to have all these laborers in it. Now, I have seen a team do like 1 less labor pack, but the point is, you're still going to have at least 8 laborers, potentially like 11. And as you're gathering this down the hallway, Prot Warrior gathers are slow, okay? Because you need to face tank to keep your mitigation up. So you're kind of like face tanking this pack, backpedaling slowly, and then once you get here, you're kind of aggroing everything else over here. By this point, I usually have like 20 plus stacks of this bleed, and it's just very brutal. Like I don't think I've gone one time without dwarfing off this bleed. And so I do worry about how that would maybe feel. You'd probably need definitely an external. You'd probably need a lot of focus healing from your healer as you're gathering this. So one thing that you can do is potentially cut out this laborer just to help with the bleeds and maybe get counts somewhere else. Like potentially maybe just pull this extra creeper at the end to help you with the bleed damage. I don't know how that feels because I've been playing dwarf, but I actually think that that's a pretty bad bleed. And then this is probably just going to be organized how you would think it would be organized. I would say Captain Dalecry, Priory bleed is next worst. This Ascari bleed is probably next. This workshop bleed from the processing unit is probably 4th. And then I'd say like the mean mug bleeds from the patrons and brew is not as bad. You're lusting that pull too, so like you feel extra good even though you have that bleed up. So this one isn't too bad. This is kind of the order I would say the bleeds are in. Now let's look at the meld skips. Which ones are mandatory in high keys, first of all? And is there a way around it? The Rookery meld by the corner of the stairs. Okay, so This double hobgoblin skip is not mandatory. I have seen teams do it where you pull the double hobgoblin but skip something else. That pull sucks, but as long as you're skipping something else, the time difference shouldn't be too crazy. So I would not say this is mandatory, and there is a way around this, so I'm going to put alternative. The Rookery meld skip corner by stairs. I would say this is mandatory, but there is an alternative. So I'll say this is optional, but alternative. Because you actually don't have to skip the double hobgoblins to time Cinderbrew and high keys. This is mandatory. You do have to skip that corner pack because that's how it works with the skip route in Rookery, where you're using the parasol or glide, and you're just the pulls look a little bit different. You end up skipping this corner pack. You just will never pull this. It's very inefficient. So I would say this is mandatory in high keys. However, there's an alternative by just shrouding or invis potting it, which makes meld not mandatory. Floodgate bubble skip, I would say that this is also mandatory in high keys to time the key. It's just it's so inefficient sitting there for like 2.5 minutes killing bubbles. No high floodgates timed are pulling bubbles. There is an alternative as well though, and that's like the water walking levitate path of frost shroud over the water. I would say the alternative to this is not even nearly as good as the original, though, where like the alternative to the Rookery skip is completely fine. I'm going to say the alternative is kind of bad. It's very easy to mess this up, and you actually end up having to pull... where's the guy? You actually end up having to pull this guy, the jump starter, if you do it, which is not a great mob. Motherlode Peacemaker. This is optional and easy as Prot War because you can spell reflect the Peacemaker cast. So I don't really think I ever see myself skipping this as a Prot Warrior. It's an easy pack. So I might actually take this out because I feel like it has no weight in my decision now that I think about it. The Double Mastermind, I want to say maybe mandatory in high keys. I think it's maybe a little early to tell if healers can heal a double mastermind channel that's going off. There is no alternative because it has true sight, so you can't shroud or invis pot it. As far as I know, the corridor entering this boss room is too narrow. I don't know of any wall jumps, and I think gate also aggroes. It's too close, so literally the only option here is to pull this if you don't have meld. I don't know what I just did there, but double war machine, there's also you might be able to gate up to the final platform through the mountain. I'm not 100% sure, but I want to say this is maybe mandatory too. I'm not sure if healers can heal this on high keys. I'm just going to put no alternative for now because I know that you can't invis pot or shroud this. You might be able to gate this through the hill. I have not seen any teams try. But that's why I'm putting maybe. And then Workshop, meld one of the last two packs is... Well, melding one of the last two packs is mandatory. You're not going to pull both those last two packs. But there is an alternative because you can just Shroud or Mind Soothe. So let's take a look at this. And I'm Dwarf right now, so none of these bleeds matter to me because I can Dwarf all of them off, and the bleeds that get repetitively applied, I would just kite. But in terms of the melds, so double hobgoblin skip, it's optional. There's an alternative. But then the rest of them are, I would say, either mandatory or maybe mandatory on high keys. But the Rookery has an alternative. You just bring a rogue or invis pot. Bubbles, you can bring DK Sham or Priest and either invis pot or shroud if you have a rogue over the water. This is probably the worst alternative out of all of them. Double Mastermind and War Machine might be mandatory in high keys, and the fact that there's no alternative might mean that as a tank without meld or a group without meld, you might get kind of hard-walled at a certain key level, dying to double Mastermind or double War Machine just because the damage. I could see that happening. Not sure if we're at the key level where we know that it's a hard wall yet. I haven't seen any Prot Warriors doing like many 18 or 19 Motherlodes. So, And then last but not least, workshop, melding one of the last 2 packs. It is mandatory, but if you don't have meld, you can just bring a rogue or a priest, which is easy to get in your groups because they're both good. So because there's a good alternative to this, I'm going to remove it, because whenever there's a great alternative to a skip, I don't really think it plays into my decision. There's an alternative because you can just push your key and plan your own comp. But these 3 things, which I think may be mandatory in higher keys, and there's either no alternative or a bad alternative, are the ones that scare me the most. I actually find Motherlode a harder dungeon than most tanks probably would as Prot Warrior, just because we can't skip these masterminds and double war machines. But the good thing is, I can dwarf off the bleed from the lieutenant. So looking at this though, I do not think I'm going to go Night Elf. I think there is a great amount of alternatives to some of the skips, and the 3 things I have here I don't think are reason enough for me to switch. I think that good players may figure out ways to live this. The best DPS specs at the end of the day, at the end of the season, are going to be the ones that can live. So you're just going to end up bringing tankier specs anyway. But I think that these 5 bleeds that are really bad this season, Dwarf is just too good as Prot Warrior to give up. That's why most of the top Warrior tanks right now are playing Dwarf, and if they aren't playing Dwarf, they're probably not doing that because of Raid. I know there's some good ones that are playing like Human or Tauren for Raid, but I think they probably would switch Dwarf if they could. But there's a lot of Dwarfs, high-end Warrior Dwarfs. Some of them are playing Night Elf, don't get me wrong. This isn't like a forever decision, but I think for right now, I'm going to stay Dwarf. Yeah, and that's going to conclude this video. I know it's a long one, half-an-hour video, but this is my logic and my reasoning for why I'm probably going to stay Dwarf for now until I feel really hard stuck. If I feel really hard stuck where I just can't do these keys on a higher level without meld, but I might be able to live the bleeds without Dwarf, then maybe I switch, but I don't think I'm quite at that point yet. So Dwarf it is. Thank you guys for watching. Have a great one. We'll see you in the next one.